Hello, this is Story Owl. This story may sound like science fiction, but it is not. It was reported, investigated, and recorded when it happened. On a quiet summer night in 1955 in rural Kentucky, something occurred that has never been fully explained, and it went on to become one of the most debated nighttime encounters in American history. Shortly after midnight, on a lonely country road in western Kentucky, two overloaded cars tore through the darkness toward the Hopkinsville police station. Inside were men, women, and children, barefoot, shaking, some crying, others barely able to speak. They did not report a robbery. They did not claim a murder. They told officers that their farmhouse had been surrounded, that something small, inhuman, and unkillable had come out of the night. Before sunrise, the story would reach newspapers across the United States. Before the week was over, it would be mocked, renamed, and misunderstood. And decades later, it would still be debated. But before the jokes, before the headlines, before the label of goblins, there was a family in a house, a strange light in the sky, and a long night of fear that none of them ever forgot. This is the Hopkinsville Goblin Siege. To understand what happened on August 21, 1955, you have to understand where it happened. Christian County, Kentucky in the mid-1950s was quiet, rural, and deeply traditional. The land was mostly farmland, tobacco fields, corn rows, wooded areas broken up by dirt roads. Nights were dark in a way that is difficult to imagine today. There were no street lights. Porch bulbs were weak. Once the sun went down, the countryside belonged to shadows, insects, and the occasional passing car. Kelly was not really a town so much as a small community, a scattering of farmhouses and families who knew each other well. Hopkinsville, about 8 miles away, was the nearest place with a police station, hospital, and newspapers. Crime in the area was rare. Violent disturbances were even rarer. When police were called late at night, it was usually for a domestic argument or a drunk causing trouble, not reports of a farmhouse under siege. The farmhouse at the center of the incident belonged to Lucky Sutton, a young farmer in his early 20s. He lived there with his wife, Vera Sutton, and members of their extended family. Also staying at the house was Billy Ray Taylor, a relative visiting from Pennsylvania. Other adults present that night included Glennie Langford, Lucky Sutton's sister, Lonnie Langford, Mary Langford, June Taylor, Betty Taylor, Helen Sutton. There were also 3 young children in the home. These were not thrill-seekers or attention-hungry people. They were farmers, homemakers, and laborers, people accustomed to hard work and long days. None of them had any history of mental illness. None were known for drinking heavily. None had anything to gain from making up a story that would bring ridicule to their family for generations. The Sutton farmhouse was simple and functional. It was not large, but it was sturdy, wooden walls, screened windows, and a front porch that faced the open yard and fields beyond. A well sat a short distance from the house, providing water for cooking and drinking. The surrounding land was open enough that anything moving nearby could usually be seen during the day. At night, however, visibility dropped sharply. The tree line and nearby fields created deep pockets of darkness just beyond the reach of the porch light. The house had no telephone. Something went wrong, help was 8 miles away. Sunday, August 21, 1955, began and ended like countless other summer days in rural Kentucky. The family spent the day working, eating, talking, and relaxing. Billy Ray Taylor's visit was not unusual. Family members came and went regularly. There was no party. No alcohol-fueled gathering. Just people sharing a home on a warm summer night. As evening approached, some family members sat on the porch. Others moved inside, preparing food and settling the children. The sounds of insects filled the air. The sky was clear. Nothing suggested that by morning, their home would be crawling with police officers and reporters. At approximately 7 p.m., Billy Ray Taylor stepped outside to retrieve water from the well. As he walked, he looked up. What he saw, according to his later statement to police, was a bright, circular object moving across the sky from the northwest toward the southeast. He described it as glowing with a multicolored trail behind it. Then, according to Billy Ray, the object appeared to descend, dropping toward the ground before disappearing behind trees roughly a quarter mile away. He hurried back inside, breathless, and told the family what he had witnessed. Some laughed it off. Others listened more closely. Billy Ray wasn't known for telling wild stories, and his agitation was obvious. Still, no one rushed outside. No alarms were raised. After a brief discussion, the family dismissed the incident. That decision would soon feel like a mistake. For nearly an hour after Billy Ray's report, nothing happened. The house returned to normal. The family talked, ate, and prepared for the night. But several witnesses later said they felt uneasy, an undefined sense that something was wrong. Outside, the darkness deepened. Then the dogs began to bark. Not the casual barking of animals reacting to a passing noise, but deep, frantic barking filled with fear. The sound cut through the house, raising hairs on arms and necks. Lucky Sutton, the head of the household, reached for his shotgun. Billy Ray grabbed a .22 rifle. Together they stepped out onto the porch. The yard was bathed in pale moonlight. Shadows stretched across the grass. The dogs strained toward the edge of the property, snarling and barking toward the fence line. And that's when Lucky saw it. Two glowing eyes stared back at him from the darkness. They were large, too bright, set far apart, and they didn't blink. The creature stepped forward, emerging from the shadows into clear view. A small humanoid figure, roughly 3 to 4 feet tall, stood watching them. They later described it as having a large, round head, pointed ears that stuck out from the sides, long arms that reached nearly to the ground, large, glowing yellow eyes, a body that appeared silvery or metallic. It did not run, it did not speak, it simply watched. Believing they were in danger, Sutton raised his shotgun and fired. The blast hit the figure. Instead of falling, it flipped backward and disappeared into the darkness. It didn't stagger. It didn't limp. It simply righted itself and began to move again, gliding rather than walking, drifting back toward the trees. Shock washed over both men. Whatever they had just shot should not have stood back up. Before they could react, movement drew their attention upward. Another creature was perched on the roof. It crouched there silently, its glowing eyes fixed on them. Billy Ray fired. The creature fell from the roof onto the ground below. Moments later, it stood back up. That was when panic took hold. Lucky and Billy Ray retreated inside, slamming the door shut. The family gathered in the center of the house as fear spread rapidly from adult to child. Outside, shapes moved through the darkness. Shadows passed beneath windows. The dogs' barking grew frantic. Minutes passed. Then another figure appeared, this time at a window. Gunfire erupted again. According to the family, the creature retreated, only to return later from another direction. This pattern repeated again and again over the next 3 to 4 hours. The figures appeared at windows, peered through doorways, climbed onto the roof, circled the house from different angles. Each time the family fired. Each time the creatures withdrew. None appeared injured. Inside the farmhouse, chaos reigned. Adults reloaded weapons while trying to watch every side of the house. The children were huddled together, furniture was pushed against doors. Curtains were pulled tight. At one point, a creature reportedly reached through a window. 3 long, clawed fingers curled around the frame. A small face pressed close to the glass, glowing faintly from within. The eyes peered inside, calm and curious. Lucky fired through the window, shattering the glass. The creature vanished. But before anyone could breathe, another appeared at a different window, repeating the same slow, deliberate motion. The family realized they were surrounded. For the next several hours, the farmhouse became a fortress. The creatures appeared repeatedly, on the roof, at the windows, at the doors, and along the tree line. They never spoke. They never rushed the house. They simply watched, testing boundaries, retreating when fired upon, only to return moments later. As the clock crept toward midnight, exhaustion set in. Ammunition was running low. Nerves were shattered. The creatures continued to appear. Unsure whether the creatures would eventually break in, or whether they were simply waiting, the family made a decision. They would flee. At approximately 12:30 a.m., the family piled into 2 vehicles and sped toward Hopkinsville. They arrived at the police station frantic and terrified. Their sudden appearance caused immediate confusion. 11 people poured inside at once, talking over one another, some crying, others visibly shaking. They claimed they had been attacked for hours by small, glowing creatures that seemed immune to gunfire. At first, officers suspected alcohol, hysteria, or a prank gone too far. But as the family calmed down, something became clear. Their stories matched. Every detail, appearance, movement, behavior, was consistent across all witnesses. No one contradicted anyone else. And none of them appeared amused or excited by the attention. They were exhausted, frightened, desperate. Sheriff Russell Greenwell listened carefully. He asked about weapons, about drinking, about mental state. Given the number of people involved and the report of heavy gunfire, police took the situation seriously. Hopkinsville police contacted the Christian County Sheriff's Department, the Kentucky State Police, military police from Fort Campbell. In total, 7 officers accompanied the family back to the farmhouse. They arrived shortly after 1 a.m. When they arrived, Officers stepped out cautiously, flashlights in hand, scanning the trees and the roofline. There were no glowing eyes waiting. No movement in the yard. Just silence. But the evidence was there. Bullet holes peppered the walls and windows. Screens were torn. Glass lay shattered beneath window frames. The smell of gunpowder still hung faintly in the air. Officers found spent shell casings scattered around the property, exactly where the family said they had fired, clear signs of prolonged gunfire. What they did not find were footprints, bodies, or any trace of the creatures themselves. The officers searched the surrounding woods, sweeping beams of light through tall grass and underbrush. Nothing emerged. Eventually, with no immediate threat visible, they advised the family to remain inside and try to rest. Some officers stayed nearby for a short time, then left as dawn approached. The family remained awake until dawn. By morning, reporters had arrived. The story spread rapidly, headlines mocked the event. The phrase "little green men" was coined, despite the family never using that description. Public opinion split sharply. Some suggested the creatures were actually great horned owls, misidentified in the dark. But the family had lived in the area their entire lives. They knew owls. And owls do not glide upright, resist gunfire, climb onto roofs, or peer through windows with clawed hands. Others argued mass hysteria. But mass hysteria does not leave bullet holes in walls, or produce identical descriptions from multiple witnesses independently reacting to the same stimuli over several hours. And then there were those who believed the Suttons encountered something genuinely unknown. Perhaps extraterrestrial visitors. Perhaps something interdimensional. Perhaps a rare, misclassified phenomenon that briefly crossed into human experience. The truth is, no explanation has ever fully accounted for all the details. What remains undeniable is this: for nearly 4 hours, 11 people were convinced their home was under siege. They described the same creatures, behaving the same way, reacting the same way to gunfire, and retreating together just before dawn. The family never changed their story. They never sought profit. They never recant. Decades later, surviving witnesses still stood by their account. No bodies were found. No proof was recovered. But something happened. Whatever came to their farmhouse that night was not human, and it came close enough to look through their windows. The Hopkinsville Goblin Siege remains one of the most documented and debated encounters in American paranormal history, not because it was dramatic or mysterious from a distance, but because it unfolded slowly, intimately, and terrifyingly close. In a quiet stretch of Kentucky farmland, something stepped out of the woods, tested the boundaries of a home, and then vanished without explanation, leaving behind only shattered glass, bullet holes, and a question that has never been answered. What really surrounded that farmhouse in the dark? And why did it stay so long? For those who've followed to the end, thank you for watching. If you'd like to follow more stories like this, consider subscribing. See you in the next video.